You ready? You're listening to the Real Pineapple Podcast Network. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, gays and gays. This is the Real Pineapple. This is your humble host, Hunter, here. Hope you're having a great night, day, weekend, whenever you're checking this out. I've got a review for Dandelion, which is directed by Nicole Riegel, who you know from directing the 2020 film Holler, which if you have not checked that out, I highly recommend that you do. And this film stars Kiki Layne, who I have talked about with great reference on the podcast. I'm a huge fan of her work. You know her from Native Son, The Old Guard, and of course, If Beale Street Could Talk. And then also, shockingly, in Chippendale Rescue Rangers back in 2022, which she's really fucking great in as well. She's kind of amazing. So, the film proper, Dandelion, we follow the titular character where she's growing up in Ohio, and she's struggling. Her mom is sick, and as an artist, she's just not feeling fulfilled. She is incredibly frustrated with her art, feels like she should be a bigger artist than she is, and so she goes ahead and takes this pretty big chance and goes ahead and drives throughout the night to South Dakota to go ahead and compete at this biker-esque music festival, and really takes a chance on herself. And through this interaction and through these people and artists she meets, she goes ahead and discovers more about herself. And what I'll say about this movie is, if you're an artist or you've grown up like I have, I've talked about it. My dad played thousands of open mics. I've been in more coffee shops. I've probably been as many coffee shops watching open mics as I've been in movie theaters watching films. I've been to a lot of open mics in my day. And one thing that I really love that Regal captures here, she definitely captures that open mic night, very much that artistic grind of performing at a coffee shop on a Tuesday, performing on a Wednesday, performing on a Thursday. She really does encapsulate that grind very well. And Kiki Layne, I'll be real, I had no idea she sang. I had no idea she sang, but there is, without getting too spoilery, there is a point where she's in a music studio and she performs a song. And the song that she performs legitimately brought me to tears. It was one of those things where I was like, I didn't know I needed Kiki Layne performing an original song, but I'm really happy I got it. You know what actually reminded me of? You remember, I'm sure a lot of you have seen it. You remember in Creed 2 when Adonis is walking to the ring in Russia to fight Drago, and Tessa Thompson sings him out to the ring, does that song, I Will Go to War. It gave me goosebumps in that same way, where I just went, wow, do I want a Kiki Layne like full album? I kind of think I want a full Kiki Layne album. And her playing Dandelion, she really does encapsulate and just really captures that indie artist aesthetic. And you feel her frustration, and that is really in large part to Regal's not just direction but the script. I've talked about it before on the podcast. I think it's hard to do both, let alone for your second film. But I don't want to give that. I don't want to give that away. What I will say is, if you watch Holler, the overlap, the kind of the Venn diagram between the films is quite interesting. Holler is about a woman who has the weight of her family thrust upon her to be successful. She's supposed to be the one that goes off to college. She's supposed to be the chosen one. She's the one who's supposed to get out of the town and make something of herself. Dandelion is very much in that same realm, in that same ilk, but unfortunately there are circumstances outside of her control that are holding her back. And one thing that Riegel really does capture is that angst and that frustration. And you feel that frustration not just from the small town perspective, but from the female perspective. There's this great scene where Dandelion is like in this room or at this venue, and she sees all these male musicians, but there's like no female art. There's no female artists. You know, there's no Gladys Knight. There's no Melissa Etheridge. There's no Whitney Houston. There's no there's no Annie DeFranco. Like all these, and I'm just thinking off the top, but the lack of representation visually there, I think, is so poignant and so important, because it really points out the thing that I've talked about hundreds of times on the podcast. People will say, morons, let me rephrase that, morons will say that, a black Captain America is going woke. They'll say, a black woman directing or starring in a film. Do I even need to bring up the fucking Woman King and how that shit went as far as certain people? People always say something is woke when it's not familiar, because they want to go ahead and undercut the potential impact that that's going to go ahead and have. And the fact of the matter is that Dandelion is in this situation where she's an outcast, not just as a black woman, but as an artist. And one of the first things that happens to her, she goes up on the stage and tries to sing, and there are a bunch of white, like racist ass white men going like, "Oh, go back to the coffee shop. Like, why is a girl up here singing? And like, you take it off, show your tits." And it's all this like sexist, racist shit. And she's not on stage 30 seconds before that shit starts. And that right there, that's why representation is important. Right there is because people try to undercut things in the sake of delaying progress. Progress is coming whether you like it or not. It might be at a turtle's pace, but progress is coming. And the fact that in the music industry especially, you see how hard it is to find that lane. And Dandelion flat out not seeing a spot on the wall that represents people that are like her just speaks volumes to the fact that as a black woman, or just as a woman, it's hard to find a lane artistically, period. I've talked about how, once women in Hollywood hit 40, I mean, it's become a joke on the show, but it's true, how once you hit 40, you're getting mom roles if you're a woman. Not everyone can be Julianne Moore. Unfortunately, not everyone can be Rachel Weisz. Not everyone can, like you see these female actresses who've been in the game for a while. For every Meryl Streep, there's 20 women who are thrown by the wayside once they hit 40. So it's really interesting, the dynamic that the film goes ahead and brings up, because it's unfortunately rooted in a lot of truth. And that's, you can definitely feel that not just through the writing, but through Layne's performance. It definitely feels like Riegel and Layne are definitely in sync on how Dandelion should be played, not just through the performance, but through her music. There's a lot of pain in her music, and the beautiful thing about this movie is witnessing her understand and find peace in that. Because, look, I've talked about it here on the podcast myself, as a black man, I feel inspired sometimes to talk about things that don't relate to me. If there's a LGBTQ issue, like fucking J.K. Rowling being, a horrendous transphobic woman, I'll go ahead and I'll bring that up and I'll talk about it. I don't, I'm not the Colbert Report, but I do feel a responsibility to go ahead and use my voice. And what I love about Dandelion is that that's an artistic struggle for her. It's an artistic struggle for her to find her voice. But the thing is, it should be. As an artist, you're always going to be evolving. You're always going to be changing. You're always going to be fine tuning. It's never going to be perfect. But Dandelion learns to fall in love with the process again. And I think that's where the meat of the story really is. And I think that's where the film really shines. I haven't even mentioned him yet, but Thomas Doherty plays Casey, who ends up becoming a love interest. And it's so fascinating to see how she is at first definitely hesitant, which she has every right to be given what she goes through during her first performance, but how Casey and Dandelion, they go ahead and inspire each other, and how, there is a vulnerability to sharing your art. And, especially collaborating. I work on I collaborate the Afternoon Tune a lot, and I've talked about how, Josh and Nick over there, how much I appreciate the fact that they trust me enough to go ahead and, give my opinion and potentially get backlash because of how much of a loudmouth I can be. But I think it's important as an artist to go ahead and be willing to take those chances and realize that sometimes, yeah, it won't always work out, but at the same time, it's better than not knowing. There's this incredible scene early on in the film that Kiki Layne and Melanie Nicholas King, who plays her mom, Jean, they have this argument, and I don't want to get into the dialogue about the argument, but that scene in particular, and that's early on in the film, that I just went, shit. Like, it's one of those conversations where, and I've talked about this too prior, but no one can hurt you more than a family member or a best friend, because they know your buttons, they know what makes you tick, and the conversation that they have, the fight that they have, and the way that that's brought back later on in the film once Dandelion goes on her journey, I thought was so fucking profound and so well done that I really found myself really tearing up. And the end of the movie, without spoiling anything, ends in a way that I went, hell yeah. You really go through the hero's journey with Dandelion. She starts off as a woman who is very pessimistic and very angry. And while those components are still there, given what she goes through, there is something that happens in the third act. I won't spoil, but I just went, oh no. And you'll know it when you get there, but it's one of those things where you just went, shit. I actually had to pause the movie and go for a walk in my kitchen and just kind of do a couple laps, because I was fuming with this thing that happens in the third act. But at the end of the day, this does end on a note that is more hopeful than pessimistic. And I do believe that as long as you're making art that makes you happy and that you feel confident in and that you feel like it's your authentic self, at the end of the day, you're winning. I mean, obviously every artist wants to be successful. But again, what is success? I think that's a question that this film has a very fun time debating within itself as far as what success looks like. I've talked about here on the pod that I would rather be Craig Ferguson than Jay Leno. I would always watch, I'd usually catch the end of Leno because I'd always stay up and watch Conan, because Conan is much funnier. But, Jay Leno always had those big ratings, but I always just thought Jay Leno fucking sucked. I always thought Conan artistically, it wasn't even close on artistic merit, was the better of the two. And I think with Team Coco and everything, I think that's been proven very correct. But, I've always said that I wanted to have like a rabid fan base who got the references and rode with me and thought, my shit was cool, like a Craig Ferguson, who had this great cult following. Arguably the best late night talk show host ever, by the way. You could easily make that argument versus someone who's more manufactured like a Jay Leno. And it's very interesting how it has those conversations about what is quote good music versus what is art. And there's a conversation where a bunch of people are playing in a circle, playing music. And I love kind of the bare bones nature of that, as far as like how you write a song and how you tour. And there's so much from a music perspective, again, growing up in a musical family, that I appreciate so much. And it made me really happy, honestly. I'm such a sucker for a great music film, and I'll end up doing a double feature of this with Hearts Beat Loud, which stars Kiersey Clemons and Nick Offerman. If you haven't seen it, definitely do a double feature of this and that. Getting to my final thoughts, I was just so thrilled once I got to the end of this movie. I really love where this ended up, and I love what this had to say. Being an artist is hard. You go through moments of self-doubt. You go through moments of frustration. I've talked, I put stuff out. Sometimes I'm just like, oh my God, am I just putting this in the void for no one to listen? But at the end of the day, the art is about you. And it's okay to be selfish in that. It's okay to understand that, not every song you write is going to be your best song, and that you're constantly trying to be better. And that's okay. That's good. It's good that you're trying to continue to evolve and fine tune and find your style and find what makes you happy. And that's going to change, the more you do your art, and that's okay. That's not a bad thing. And I really love what this film has to say. I love the pessimism of it, but I love the optimism as well. It's a great yin and yang to that aspect. But this is a solid A for me. I really adore this film. I adore what this film has to say, and I think you will too. So this is playing in theaters right now. Like I said, I would go see Dandelion, and I'd come home and I'd rent Hearts Beat Loud, and I'd go like, yeah, that was a damn good double feature. But definitely check this out when you have a moment. It is well worth going to a theater for. Hell yeah, absolutely adored this movie. A solid A for Dandelion. But yeah, Dandelion, people, have you seen it? What'd you think about it? Let me know in the comments. You can go ahead and follow yours truly on Letterboxd at Black Shazam. You can follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and the Twitter at JHunter Real Pineapple. That's J Hunter, and then REEL, and then Pineapple. Go ahead and like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. It definitely helps me out. You can find the podcast on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon Music, TuneUp, and Samsung Podcasts at The Real Pineapple. You can go ahead and subscribe to the podcast as well on YouTube at The Real Pineapple. That's REEL Pineapple. And go ahead and follow the show on Twitch at twitch.tv/The Real Pineapple. Been streaming a lot more recently and going to be streaming a lot more regularly in the future. So go ahead and follow me on there as well. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Along with this review, I'm going to have a interview with the writer and director of this film, Nicole Riegel. Real excited to talk to her. I'll be talking to her in a couple days to go ahead and pair this review with that interview. So go ahead and keep an eye out for that. I also have an interview with the stars and the director of Goldilocks and the Two Bears, along with a review for that. That should be coming down the pipeline here in the next couple days, as well as, what else do I have? I'll have a review up for Captain America Brave New World, the trailer breakdown for that. Yes, Captain America is black. To those of you who don't like that, I don't care. Along with some other stuff coming down the pipeline, including a review for Twister and Twisters. Yeah, so a lot of stuff coming down the pipeline, y'all. But everyone, thank you so much for listening. Stay safe, take care of each other. Give someone a hug, give someone a compliment. We could all use some more positivity. And never forget, as always, to keep it real.